Going live. We're live. Welcome to Meditating with John Vervaeke. We live stream every weekday morning at 9:30 a.m. with Mondays alternating between a new lesson called Dharma Day and a review of the whole ecology of practice called Upaya Day. We will, of course, be changing the Upaya Day next time around because we will do Upaya Day according to the two streams, the Eastern tradition and the Western tradition. If you're joining us for the first time, you're most welcome. For previous lessons and sits, see the description in this video. I recommend strongly you go back and do the first lesson and then do one or two lessons every week while you continue to meet with us, and you will soon catch up and integrate with us. And I have an announcement. This is our 100th live stream meeting. So congratulations to all of us. I think that's the right way to put it. I want to thank everybody who is contributing to this, of course, Amara and Jason, and also Mark and Brett for helping to make the Sangha such a hospitable place and encourage people to join the Discord server community. I'd love to thank the Sangha itself. I love this Sangha. I have received so much nourishment from my involvement and participation in it. It is a truly wonderful, in both senses of the word, way to begin the day. So thank you all so very much for this and for your participation and for your feedback and the way you support each other. This is truly a great gift that we're all giving to each other. So in order to perhaps extend that gift and give it to others, can you please help me by liking this stream to increase its visibility on the YouTube algorithm? At the end of every session, there are Q&A. Please limit your questions at that time to the ecology of practices. However, you can ask questions from any lesson of the course. For a more general Q&A, please join me this Friday, August the 21st at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, live stream on YouTube for our general Q&A. I hope to see you there. Okay, so Monday was a new Upaya Day, so there isn't any material to review. I hope that you guys are going over the Wisdom of Hypatia section on Epicureanism. You're starting to see which of these general practices you're going to take up. Perhaps you're practicing the desire cataloging practice or the savoring practice. Generate some questions for me. So next Monday will be a Dharma Day, and as I've said, the Dharma Day actually sort of spreads out Monday, Wednesday, Friday when we're doing the Wisdom of Hypatia. It's a little bit more like a course. That means Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays typically are longer. Monday we will turn to talking about the Epicurean response to fear, and we will then build into Epicurean encouragement, especially through philosophical companionship. And so that's what's coming ahead. I've been noting it in my life how this return to Epicureanism, I mean, when you can return and get something from it again that deepens, that's the element of sacredness, right? And I've noticed in my life that this return to Epicureanism and the remembering, the sati of ataraxia, of peace, through both the desire cataloging, and the maximization, but all of that is actually focused on the ataraxia, the pure joy of being that we can practice bringing into a touchstone awareness through savoring. I've been noticing how impactful that is on me, how this ability to return to peace starts to permeate as an undercurrent through my day. And so I've been very grateful for this. I'd always tended to, of the four great ancient traditions, Epicureanism, Stoicism, Aristotelianism, and Neoplatonism, I always tended to regard Epicureanism as sort of, the well-meaning but not that too bright cousin of that family. I thought there was some value in it, but I saw much more value in Stoicism and Neoplatonism. The reason I don't mention Aristotelianism is that Aristotelianism is taken up into Neoplatonism. So I've been deeply appreciative of getting to teach you guys about this. I have discovered that there is this reciprocal relationship, at least for my pedagogy, that I learn the best when I'm teaching others, and I teach others the best when I'm sharing my learning with them. And so, once again, I guess I've come around in a circle to thank the Sangha once again for affording me this home in which I can rediscover the sacredness within Epicureanism. So, thank you very much. So, today we'll have a regular sit. We'll begin with chanting. We'll go into the silent sit. We'll come out of it. It is a Wednesday, which means during the Q&A, we will give priority to questions from the Western tradition, from the Wisdom of Hypatia course. So, get yourself into position. Set your phones on Do Not Disturb. And we will begin when I say begin. Begin. One. One. Begin your silent sit. Slowly come out of your practice, trying as best you can to integrate what you cultivated in your practice with your everyday consciousness, cognition, character, communitas, perhaps by reciting the 5 promises to yourself. I'll recite them aloud today, perhaps as a help. Precepts are a living thing. They tend to evolve for me, and my articulation of them tends to evolve. In reverence and respect for the power and promise of life, I promise not to harm, but to care for living things wisely in the aspiration to enlightenment. In reverence and respect for the power and promise of material things, I promise not to abuse them or misuse them, treat them wisely in the aspiration to enlightenment. In reverence and respect for the power and promise of speech, I promise not to speak foolishly, but to speak wisely in the aspiration to enlightenment. In reverence and respect for the power and promise of sexuality, I promise not to have sex mindlessly, but to love wisely in the aspiration to enlightenment. In reverence and respect for the power and promise of consciousness, I promise not to alter my consciousness indulgently, but to transform it wisely in the aspiration to enlightenment. So, reminder again that we have a new question schedule, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We will be concentrating on questions, giving priority to, but not totally exclusively, the questions from the Western tradition, the wisdom of Hypatia tradition. Tuesdays and Thursdays, questions derived from the Eastern tradition, the Buddhist and Taoist traditions. Also a reminder, many of you are doing this, and it's much appreciated. You're sharing observations, questions, edifications, which are very, very helpful. And a final reminder, because of the nature of the wisdom of Hypatia, we will tend to be going longer on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. There's a question, 8 and C. If you have dabbled in other practice and see those things interfering, can you compartmentalize them with a word like compartmentalizing to leave them open while focusing on the psychology? Yes. So you can just label them, right? Put them aside, precisely because they're interfering. And that's going to be an important practice. So I'm glad you brought that up, because as I mentioned, I recommend you, so you're cultivating your ecology of practice. Here's a particular perennial problem you want to address. Perhaps it's an issue of self-deception, or perhaps a particular reciprocal narrowing. Okay, so what practice can I do that will afford a reciprocal opening? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try a variety of practices, try them on, and then select the one that most transfers to my life, not just feels the best while I'm practicing it. That is an insufficient guide. The one that seems to transfer, transformative transference, with the ones that transfers most transformative to my life, that's the practice I take up. So I pick a perennial problem, I pick up practice, and then I try a variety, and then I'm going to look for the one that's transformative. That might not be the one that my mind initially enjoys the most or likes the most. Right? Sometimes it is, but sometimes it isn't. And so what Aidan's pointing out, once we do that selection, we need to sometimes, we've been practicing these other ones and we've built up a bit of habit around them, and we need to put them aside. And we need to be sort of gently. We need to label them, yes, and just putting them aside and returning to the practice. It's very much like what you're doing in the meditative practice. So thank you, Aidan, for saying that and for bringing that up. I think that is a very astute and helpful thing, especially there's a kairos around it. At this time, the timing of what you said, I think, is very well placed. Mark, hey Mark, observation, tried some savoring today, but I have a messy office and not a lot of connections came up for me because it's laid out much like my mind all over the place. Yes, very good observation. That's why I use the metaphor, but I should emphasize it. McClellan's metaphor that Epicureanism is about being in the garden, and savoring should be sort of turning something into a garden. Now, eventually, that will be possible, sort of, no matter where you are. But it's a very good idea to do this practice for a very long time in a natural setting. That's the evolutionary, machinery. There's the biophilia hypothesis and there's increasing evidence that when we're in natural settings, we move to a more optimal functioning. So we want more natural living things around us. So I walk in an area, obviously it's in an urban area. I go walking through a residential area where people have their gardens and they have their hedges and their lawns and there's trees. And so there's enough there that the savoring works. So try as much as possible for a long time to have the savoring in situations, right, where you can experience like a garden, that there's biophilia involved. I strongly recommend that. The other thing you could do is to zero in the savoring on very specific things like eating some food, do the savoring, or drinking some water, doing the savoring. But I understand Mark's point. When you're doing the walking practice, the more expansive practice, the moving practice, then yes, be in a place that is rich with the potential for biophilia, and therefore is most likely to trigger this primordial processing, so that it can eventually be exapted up into the more technological environment we often find ourselves in a prevalent fashion. Robert Gray, here's an observation. Hi, Robert. I did answer you, Robert, emailed in response to your pen pal questions. Robert says, the best 36 minutes of my day. Didn't realize it was just 36 minutes. Thank you, John, Jason, Omar. Thank you all. Thank you, Robert. And it warms my heart, brings joy to me to know that this is helping you, because you're a good person, and it is a good thing to help good people become better. Really, it's a really good thing. And think about that. It is a good thing to help good people become better. And think about savoring that. Think about savoring that, and think about philosophical companionship. Because philosophical companionship is a practice about, finding and relating to, good people, making and helping them. You're not making them better, but helping them become better. It is a really good thing to help good people become better. Crown Sword, I don't think I've met you before, so welcome. My experience during the practice reminds me of worship in church in my Christian days. Intense atmosphere of peace, a kind of sacredness, a different kind of presence that commands gentle reverence. Thank you for sharing that. That is how it should be. That is how it should be. That is what I aspire to, because that is the home which will do exactly what I was just talking about. So thank you for sharing that. It means a lot to me. Thank you. Karima Cynthia Clayton, in analyzing desires, what is the role of resistance? I find I savor it more than I used to. It seems to herald needed growth. That's cool. That's cool. So you can actually savor if I'm understanding you correctly, Karima, you can actually savor the experience of resistance itself, because for you, there's been an aspect shift. It now presents itself not just as resistance, but as a ground, an opening, an opportunity for growth. That is really good. That goes towards what's called the silver lining principle in hedonic editing. We're going to talk about this when we talk about the fourfold cure of Epicureanism. If you can, I'll go into more depth later, but the silver lining principle is and people misunderstand it, is it's not just finding the silver lining. It's aspect shifting, so that, right, the silver lining isn't, within the negative dark cloud. The silver lining is a access point so that you can shift the entire aspect of the thing you're looking at. So it's no longer sort of overshadowed. Hey, that works, with dark clouds, rather than being overshadowed. And so being able to savor it as an opportunity for growth. I would point out that if you're finding that more comprehensively, that's a real marker of growth on your part, Karima. I think that is a sign of a change at the level of one's character. And always, 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 it's not ultimately about altered states of consciousness. It's about altered traits of character. You can change your consciousness all you want, but if it doesn't translate into the transformation of character, you are just engaging in what Trungpa called spiritual materialism. You're doing spiritual bypassing, is another way of talking about it, from the psychotherapeutic literature. But if those altered states, like what Karima's are bridging into the transformation of character, then you are really on the path. Another question from Aiden C. What are your thoughts on savoring and reinstalling technology and our soulless industrial environment? Yes, Aiden. So there's a practical response, which I already gave. I recommend starting for a very long time, and this comes out in Rafe Kelly's work on doing parkour in the natural environment and the whole movement practices. I've got videos with Rafe, and he has his own channel. And so I recommend very strongly that you spend a lot of time in biophilia. I just went camping again this weekend. I haven't done it for a while, and the parks are finally open, and they've got all the social distancing in place. It was actually a place I used to go as a child, so it was a deep sort of almost homecoming. And the people where I was, most of the beloved people in my life. And so, but again, just being there, and that sense of how readily it affords ataraxia. I recommend practicing that a lot, and then gradually trying to bring it in, as you said, Aidan, to the soulless technological environment. I recommend, if this takes some deeper conceptual cognitive work, because we're natural born cyborgs, the technology isn't just out there as a tool. It permeates, mostly unconsciously, it permeates our very sense of self and our way of sizing up the world. And so some of the work coming out of Heidegger on the question concerning technology and the way in which technology insinuates an insidious metaphysics. Technology isn't evil. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the way in which it's culturally situated, and it's sort of an insidious, right? It insinuates an insidious metaphysics and existential modes into our thinking. And so learning a bit more about that, and then as a preparation. And then once you've got sort of that revision of your cultural cognitive grammar, try to bring the savoring out of the more natural biophilic environments into ones that are more technologically encompassing. That would be my recommendation. Another observation from Mark. Welcome again. I was outside taking pictures of my flower yesterday. I was savoring the outside, the smells and sounds. It worked quite well. Yes, even a short walk. Lovely. Thank you for this practice. So that's, again, so the contrast so Mark has been very exemplary here. The contrast between doing it in his room and doing it in a more natural environment is bringing out the point. And so that's why I've given the recommendations. And like I say, just simply shifting the practice from nature into the technological environment, that will work probably, but you can really ramp it up if you read some of the philosophical work that is reflecting on the way in which technology isn't just things around us. It gets insinuated, a worldview, an existential mode gets insinuated into the very fabric and texture of our being. of our self. So Takun Soho, observation, I feel calm. That's good. So here's where the Epicureanism and the Buddhist stuff really can be helpful to us. Remember, if it's the calm of escapism, if it's the contentedness of a cabbage, then that's not what's after here. But if it's ataraxia, if it's the joy of being, if it's the mindfulness presence, if it's the participation in the presencing of being itself, that active calm, the calm that is the perpetual affordance of insight, then that is the calm we're after. Matthew McCready, observation. I generally think in words and less in images, but during this course, I definitely feel my imaginative skills develop as I can imagine my inner world, etc. That is widely reported, that meditative practices open up the inner senses. That's widely reported. I also noted that it's reported that people's experience becomes more synesthetic, becomes more symptomatic. There's more synchronicities. So all of these things tend to increase. The whole imaginal realm, as opposed to the merely imaginary, the whole imaginal realm opens up quite profoundly with these extended practices, this ecology of practice. So thank you for sharing that. And that is something to savor. It really is. It's a way of coming alive, that your inner life comes alive as you start to get a felt sense of what it is to move beyond the merely propositional into the procedural and the perspectival. That's what the imagery is doing. And then when it's transforming your character, that's ultimately the participatory. So our last question, Takwin Soho. I was wondering about spiritual materialism. Would love to know more about the subject. So there's a book written by Trungpa called Spiritual Materialism. There's also, I don't remember there's a book, but there's articles within psychotherapeutic research called Spiritual Bypassing. So you can pick up the book by Trungpa called Spiritual Materialism. It's called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. And then you can. I recommend that's good, and it's considered a classic. But I also recommend taking a look within the psychotherapeutic community, perhaps doing a Google Scholar search or a Google search on spiritual bypassing, because there's added nuance and education there that you won't find in Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Amar was with us here today, so I want to thank my dear friend and Techno Mage Amar. I want to thank my beloved Jason, who's also working behind the scenes. Please subscribe to this channel to be notified of the next video. Also, please follow me on Twitter for any updates about these streams. Invite others who might benefit by sharing this series. Join the Discord server to chat with others, do group Lectio Divina, do the group movement practice, do another sit for a longer time. Also, I'm there for live Q&As. The people on Voices with Vervaeke with me also meet there for very valuable Q&As. And also, the Discord server is going to home some of the group practices that we are going to need as we cultivate the wisdom of Hypatia. Reminder that we're doing this every weekday morning at 9:30 Eastern Time. And please remember, the continuity of practice is more important than sheer quantity of practice. Don't hold yourself to the standard of harsh perfectionism. Hold yourself to the standard of virtuous friendship, because there is no enemy worse than your own mind and body, but there's no friend, no ally, no true companion on the path better than your own mind and body. Be lamps unto yourselves and to each other. Take good care, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow.